here?
I am, yeah. Hi,
And
everyone.
Zahbia, you're very welcome. Okay, so before we get into the presentations, I want to invite Sarah Zipp to introduce herself, please.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sarah. Like Aneeqa, I'm also an immigrant here in Scotland. I don't know why people from otherwise sunny places move to this dreary location, but it happens to be sunny today. So I'm going to talk in a bit about my research on girls and sport and development. So this, my background is quite all over the place. I'm an anthropologist who studied sport management, who went on to study international development. And it all makes sense in the long run because I look at I study in the field called sport for development. So we look at sport as a platform or a context to deliver development aims and goals. And because sport is a deeply gendered institution and practice, it brings out a lot of issues around gender and gender equality. So that's what I work with, particularly with adolescent girls, and particularly on the issue of menstrual health and how that impacts their lives and their ability to socialize in many ways, particularly around sport and physical activity. So that's what I've been working on in a number of places, but I'll present my research here in Zambia in a bit and look forward to your feedback.
Thank you, Sarah. And Zahbia, you're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Zahbia Yousuf. I am I'm not an academic. I am a senior research advisor. I'm working at an international peace building organization called Safe World. They're based in London, but I'll give a little intro to them later, but they have offices across different regions of the world. And yeah, I have come from an academic background, worked in a few universities, but now working in terms of research support for an international peace building organization, where I would support kind of research or organizational research processes, but also thinking about how research contributes to peace building programming. So I support different programs, or, working on issues from women's coalitions in the Sudan transition process to the research that I'll be talking about is looking at tensions between Rohingya and Bangladeshi communities in Cox's Bazar, an area where there's high concentration of Rohingya refugees, and particularly the safety and security concerns of women and girls there. So I'll talk through that research later.
Great, Zahbia, and thank you very much for joining us today. Sarah, do you know how to work the Teams presentation thing?
Yes, I do. I teach on this all the time.
Thank you. And if Aneeqa and Zahbia need assistance, just send me a text and I'll get on to Brian. Okay?
Sure.
Okay. Does that mean I'm going first?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Not a problem.
Don't mind. This is what happens when you're with the most technologically competent.
Don't tell people your abilities. They'll put them right to use. Okay, now that I've shown you, now that I've bragged about my my talents, let me see if I can get this working. Yeah. All right, are you able to see the window with the presentation?
Yes.
And is it full screen or is it still in the not presenting mode?
It's not in presenting mode yet.
I don't know why it's doing that.
How's
that?
That's good.
That's fine.
That's it. Okay.
Thank you.
Does this awkward thing though where I can't see the pictures anymore. Okay, so hello, I'm Sarah, as I just mentioned, and I'm here in Scotland. And of course, just as we begin, the mailman is coming and my landlord is coming and the dog's going to be barking. So please bear with me. But I want to talk about some of the work that I've done in menstrual health education in Zambia with some really wonderful groups. Well, like I said, my background's in anthropology, sports studies, and international development. I've worked in the US and lived in the Netherlands and worked there, and now I'm in Scotland. I've also worked and taught in Japan and Singapore. And so I'm really interested in collecting these different cultural views and approaches to sport, and thinking about how sport can serve as a platform or a context for development initiatives, and how sport connects people to communities and resources. And, you know, in that context, of course, there's a lot of rigid gender roles and restrictions that are traditions in sport and also traditions in a lot of different cultures. So I look at that through a critical feminist approach and a focus on capability theories and capability building. And one of the things that came about in my research is when I was doing my PhD and fieldwork in 2012 and 2013, and recognizing that, you know, so many girls drop out of sport for various reasons, but around the age of adolescence. And where is that coming from? You know, there's a lot of research around all these different factors and changes in their lives, but certainly one of the underdeveloped, misunderstood elements is menstrual health. And when girls get their period, it creates a whole new set of challenges, whether they're in the UK or Uganda or Colombia, they're coping with some pretty difficult challenges, and we just don't have a lot in place for them to support them across education, but particularly in the sport context. So the other thing I focused on, when I was doing my PhD, I really didn't like this reviewer, that one of my evaluators internally, that was really pressing on some of the methodologies and youth development aspects of my work. But the end result is I have a real strong focus on creating methodologies that are fun, that are child-centered, that are rooted in local context. And so I've tried to do that in this study and in all my work. And I'll share a little bit about that and some of the diaries and activities that we do. Plus, when you're working with sport, it kind of makes it easier to really bring out that sort of fun and gaming activity type of research. So my partners there were the National Organization of Women in Sport, Physical Activity and Research, also known as NOWSPAR. And they were using the GOAL curriculum, which is this curriculum for adolescent girls in sport, through the Women Win Foundation, which is this overarching, really big NGO based out of Amsterdam, and where I used to live and work with them. And they have like partners across the world in 24 countries in the global south. So they've written a curriculum of instruction around a lot of different things for adolescent girls, but particularly around menstrual health. We also borrowed some of the learning materials from Kalitasha Ltd, which and their website firstperiod.org, and that is written by a Namibian woman who also lives in Scotland. So there's another one moving from a sunny place to rainy Scotland. So she provided some of the materials you'll see. So what does this have to do with SDGs, menstrual health, SDGs, and sport for development? So obviously, SDG 5 around gender equality is sort of where I'm centered in terms of SDGs in relation to my overall work on sport for development for girls and women. But it also is relevant to quality education, in that a lot of this sort of menstrual health education and sexual and reproductive health rights is taught through schools, or maybe more accurately used to be taught through schools, although some of those services have been pulled back. And now we see SFD, sport for development organizations, and development organizations and NGOs in general stepping in to provide more of those services. The other element is the clean water and sanitation goal. Now, the UN WASH department, so it's water, sanitation, and hygiene. That's actually in some ways where sport for development was born from, even though we really don't see this stuff on menstrual health in a lot of sport for development work. But the relationship there is that one of the big problems is access to toilet facilities, particularly in public places like schools and, you know, community centers where sport is happening. And so WASH is doing a lot, and you might see some stuff floating around on Twitter and other social media these days, because May is Menstrual Hygiene Month. That was started by the WASH organization from the UN. So that's all centered around SDG 6. So with the particular program that we are working with, it's really struggled to not be able to see. Can you still see it? Is it still full screen for you? Okay. That's very annoying for me because I can't see the camera. Okay. So the particular curriculum we're working with, it was, mostly designed by Lita Ayalu Carney of Kalitasha, and she positions it as a harness your cycle program. So there's all of this stuff going on right now about menstrual management and hygiene. This is really a focus on education and deconstructing stigma. So I think one of the big pushes in the development world on the issue of menstrual health is kind of positioning products and management and hygiene as just one piece of the puzzle rather than the whole puzzle. So what I really like the Kalitasha approach with Harness Your Cycle, and it's really about understanding the full menstrual cycle, recognizing that there are high points and low points. So we hear a lot about the low points, but we also have some good things about the menstrual cycle, and also that it provides a kind of, it's the fifth vital sign. And so understanding the rhythms of your body is a way to be in tune and feel and be able to listen to your body and understand what it needs. When does it need rest? When does it need fuel? When does it need, hydration, things like that. And so giving kids that kind of framework can help them have more body autonomy. And I think that's one of the building blocks towards other aspects of sexual and reproductive health education that can then be towards body autonomy in the sense of rights and sexual rights and consent and things like that. So using sort of very basic elements of physical activity, we brought in some yoga stretches and breathing activities that not only go towards addressing some of the physical symptoms, but also can help with stress and anxiety that are associated with different aspects of the menstrual cycle. Okay. So now you can see that, did it just go to the next slide? Okay, all right, I'll stop worrying about that now. So what did we do? We were trying to better understand how adolescent girls experience sport for development and menstruation. We tried to examine a sort of holistic approach to menstrual health, one that's not just focused on providing people with pads and products, but really thinking about menstruation from a holistic point of view and thinking about physical activity and embodiment of our experience as girls and women. It was also designed to develop resources to help support adolescent girls in SFD and help to support the program facilitators and designers with resources that they can use. So we worked closely with the staff at NowSpar, facilitating the journals. The facilitators also did some journaling. We created this journal diary that the girls used over the course of 7 weeks. And there's just a screenshot of it there, or like an actual photo of it. So I was very adamant. We decided to make it spiral bound. I mean, little things like this, so it can be sat out
online.
flat.
So I'll see a little bit later, all right? Oh, fine, right. Talk to them, bye.
So that it can be sat out flat and they can draw on it and things like that. We did a variety of different types of questions where they could circle things and mix and match and draw. And that came from collaboration with the facilitators. And it also came from my own, I've actually got a stack here of little journals and things that I've done. You can't see it now. Here. With my own kids, my own adolescent daughters. And so I must admit, I stole some of those ideas and concepts from that. So we had 4 lessons that were delivered. And the first was just understanding your body, some basic principles of puberty and the menstrual cycle. Then your complete menstrual cycle, all of the different phases. And then we talked about managing your period. So that's the product part. We kind of position that within. And then the 4th is sort of harnessing your cycle. So that's the coping strategies and dealing with menstrual health. So they did things like they drew on the covers. So instead of having their name on the cover, they did a drawing, and that's how they could identify their diaries. And we had just parts that were just wide open like this. They could just make drawings or add messages. So that was great. This one's a nice thank you that they wrote on one of them. So we had 119 question items. It was big. and 53 question items for the facilitators, and there were 79 responses from the students. So we also did activities besides drawing on the covers. We did the kicking out the myths activity, which is pictured here with the facilitators. I don't have pictures of the research with the kids because I didn't, ethically, we didn't get the clearance to take pictures with the kids. But what we did with this is just a simple activity where you write down questions, you write down, stories you've heard, myths, all this stuff, and we stuff it in a bottle, and we put it in the middle, and then you kick a football at it, and whoever knocks it over, then you get to open it up and read it, and it's all anonymous, and it's just sort of an icebreaker type of activity where we can just, like, in a relaxed setting, get some of these myths out. And, one of the things I've seen in other research, and that I found in my research too, is like, it's remarkable that this particular topic, menstruation, is something that's so universally experienced and deeply embedded in our own cultural context. But it's like we're all, there was someone, I went to a conference and this woman presented and we played a game where, like, where does this come from? Is this coming from the UK or is this coming from, I think it was Zimbabwe? And it's like, and except for a few cultural clues, you could not tell because they're all like, this is happening. I don't know what to do. This is happening. It's painful. This is happening. I'm, embarrassed. Everybody's got stories of leaking. Everybody's got, stories of mistakes or embarrassing times or questions that they have. And I'm really committed to thinking about how we can pool that knowledge of experience, breaking down the taboos and share. And that empathy is a way to deconstruct the taboo, right? That empathy is an antidote for shame. And so we have these common experiences and how can we use them? So that activity is one way towards doing that. The diary methods themselves, you can see here a little closer look. So they're also the lessons. So it's at once the data collection tool as well as a learning tool. So at the end, they got to keep these diaries. We just had the facilitators took screenshots of the answers and we inputted those, the data points afterwards. And we wanted the kids to have these diaries so that they could refer to them because there's a lot of good information there. Okay, I'll try to keep moving. So what we came up with was, in relation to the four lessons, they're the themes that came out were understanding the menstrual cycle. Particularly, they had a lot of questions about menstrual hygiene management. That's the MHM there. And different learning approaches. They also had a lot of questions about pain and discomfort. Now, we didn't actually ask, and this is the first study of this kind I've done, and I can't believe we missed this, but we didn't actually ask a single question directly about pain. But we got a lot of responses about pain. And I don't know if that means that we were very lucky or we don't remember what it's like to be adolescents, but they were definitely, pain and discomfort was at the forefront of their minds, as well as alleviation for pain. The other thing that they talked a lot about was stigma, fear, and embarrassment. And we looked at that from different aspects, like how they talk to others, how they learn from others, how do they share with others, fears of leaking and exposure. And they also did an evaluation of the program. So I'll skip through a couple of these pretty quick. We had a broad age range. This is one of the, I think, limitations of the study, all the way from 10 to 17, but most are hovered around 12 to 15 years old. So obviously there's a big difference in how a 10-year-old and a 17-year-old experience things. And we wanted, in future research, take that more into account and dive into that deeper. Most of them got their period around the age of 12. That was the most common time. Several before then, and quite a few after. So one of the key points on that was, when do you learn about menstrual health compared to when do you get your period? So we know that universally the age of menarche, the first menstruation, is lowering. Used to be more like 13, 14. Now it's more hovering between 11 and 12. And so how are we making sure that kids know what's coming when it happens to them? So that's a big important piece. And actually, that's in the next slide. So I'll talk more about that. But basically, they had questions, understanding the menstrual cycle was their biggest sort of question about menstruation. Why does it happen? How does it happen? Things about, when is it healthy? Can you get pregnant? What age should it start? How long should it last? A lot of is it normal questions, what happens if it happens twice in a month, things like that. They also wanted to know about how, when, and why should they learn about menstruation? Why don't boys learn about menstruation? And they had some questions about why they don't learn sooner, which we'll dive into in a minute. And then they had a lot of menstrual hygiene management questions. How to use products, how do they get a hold of products? There's a lot of discussion around the world right now about issues of period poverty, which is lack of access to products and supplies. So they had a lot of questions in relation to that. They also had questions about just keeping clean and bathing and things like that. And that kind of stems over into that wash side of things, is how much access do they have to toilet facilities, particularly in the rural areas. This is centered in Lusaka. We had planned to do this, expand this out into the rural villages, and then COVID happened. So we haven't been able to do that yet. So I'm going to just flip back a minute to the idea of when they learn. So if you can make sense of this, what you can see there is that most learned at age 12, most think they should learn at age 10. And the important part of that is that if they're learning by age 10, then that captures everybody in here from when they said the earliest anybody got their period was age 10. So if the goal is to make sure that we can get to kids before they have that experience and it becomes very traumatic, then we need to be at 10 or sooner. Now, there are some that get their period earlier. And this is a tricky situation because it's how you teach that to an 8-year-old is going to be very different from how you teach that to a 12-year-old. So there are ways, and I would point to like the Dutch, having lived in Amsterdam and having had daughters in the Dutch education system. The Danish do a really nice job too of sort of integrating learning about health and puberty at earlier stages, sort of in bite-sized pieces. And one of the things we tend to do, particularly in the UK, which age 10 is when they learn in the UK, but we tend to just like sit down and have a big old talk. And the boys leave, and my daughter is working on a comic strip that her experience where the boys left and were playing football and laughing while the girls were being told how terrible life was about to get. I think it's a perfect, iconic picture of what happens. But so like, rather than just having that one big talk, how can we integrate this more effectively over time at different ages and stages? On pain and discomfort, so aside from asking questions just about menstruation, their next biggest set of questions just overall was about pain. Why do they have pain? Why are there cramps? And then what do they do about it? And they did seem to have good, they felt that the breathing and stretching exercises were helpful. As you can see from that quote, some of them just experience very painful periods. And I think, again, the fact that we didn't ask a question about pain is like, are we just used to it? I don't know what happens over time, but for kids, it can be very painful, but it's also something very new. And so that's, that's definitely the pain is and discomfort is something on their minds. So yeah, and they did tend to feel that the breathing exercise helped them feel relaxed, helped them feel calm. They overall generally liked that. And that was, again, a way to start to incorporate that listening to your body kind of ethos into how we understand menstrual health. Now, I think the hardest part really is around stigma, fear, and embarrassment, right? So here's a young woman saying, a girl saying, because she was afraid to talk to her family because I was scared that maybe they would shout at me for telling or not telling them. I was scared to death. How I felt that day was that I was in so much pain that I can't explain myself on this piece of paper right now. What I can say is that I managed to face my fears of not telling them. I just forgot about them shouting at me, went ahead and told my mom and sister that I have started my periods. And of course, fortunately, thankfully, her family was very supportive. So it's hard to say why a person would feel that way, why a child would feel that much fear. But it's definitely something that we saw again and again and again. They're afraid to talk about it. They feel like it's something's wrong with them or that they might be in trouble, particularly if they've like leaked and caused a bit of a mess somewhere. So when I started, I did not tell anyone about it and stayed for 2 days without me telling. But when I saw blood was not stopping, I told my sister about it. And then she gave me a pad and told me, there's a typo, and told me that I had become a big girl and that is what big girls do. One of my friends, her period started and everyone started making fun of her. How can one deal with such a situation? So there is that real fear and stigma, particularly for kids who don't have a lot of control over their environment directly. So if you're in school all day, there's not a lot you can do about where you are when this happens to you. You're surrounded by peers who may not understand. There were some other questions too about teaching boys and how can we keep boys from teasing. But overwhelmingly 90% of the kids in this study worried about leaking at school or somewhere in public. So then we asked, is it okay to talk about menstruation or should it be kept a secret? And they mostly agreed that it should not be taboo. Some of them talked about how when we talk about it, we learn. Others felt that it was private and too embarrassing to talk about. But I think that the when we keep it a secret, no one will help you message is pretty powerful. And that's one of the things we're trying to do in creating these conversations. And I think creating some of the knowledge also through peer groups, right? So we know that as they get older too, if they've all learned about menstrual health in school or through coaches or through their teachers or family, then they're going to be more equipped to talk to each other. And in general, the more they can talk about it, the better. It's all part of dismantling the stigma. So in terms of who they talked to, mostly it was mother, grandmother. In this situation, goal leader, that's their facilitator for the program. So obviously they were talking to that person, that person was delivering the program. So sisters and aunts, those kinds of groups are the most prominent. I thought it was interesting that I can't remember who's coming up next to talk about child marriage. One of the things I learned about the Zambian context is that in Zambia, the tradition was that the grandmother would teach her granddaughter about puberty and about the menstrual cycle before she is married at a young age. Now, of course, outlawing child marriage is an important and necessary thing and really a good thing without a doubt. But this is one of those unintended consequences that informal tradition and system sort of broke down. All right, I'll try to breeze through these. So basically, they really liked the program and they said it was good and they would recommend it. They said it helped them be able to talk about menstruation more. It helped them to feel more empowered in their life. It helped them to feel more confident about playing sports during their period and about being more active during their period. And that part of that was about combating some of the myths about what you can and cannot do during your period. There were some limitations. We didn't capture all the myths discussed in the little written on the pieces of paper. I wish we'd have kept those. There were some confusing questions in the diary that we had to fix. We needed some more better and consistent communication with facilitators, and there were different challenges around, working. I didn't do the research, the facilitators did the research, which is that was the intentional design, because I'm a stranger and I'm an outsider and I wanted someone that they'd known for years and trusted to have these conversations. But it does create some communication aspects. And we didn't get to those rural areas. So in conclusion, the program was helpful in teaching about menstrual cycle. It was helpful in discouraging stigma. They did connect the stretching and breathing exercises into sort of an embodiment and listen to your body approach. We felt that we were helping support youth voices, peer learning, and creative methods. We think there should be more research, particularly on adolescents. This is a really hard subject to get into with adolescents, but it's important and necessary. We think there is a strong link between sport and the menstrual cycle that should be further explored. We also, we used, the facilitators were using sustainable products that were from the Kalitasha group from Namibia at the time. So there is some interesting space there to work on using more sustainable products and actually learning from global South traditions, right? So what happens in a lot of these period product sort of movements is that, the UK or the US or someone from Europe comes in and just provides everyone with pads, when there's actually some traditional ways of coping with menstruation that are much more environmentally friendly. I already talked about how it's connected to, I realize I'm running out of time here. So the SDG 5 and SDG 4 and SDG 6 is really important, especially I think thinking about those sustainable products and learning from global South traditions. And then the last thing is just that these kinds of play-based participative action research is really effective with children and youth. It can help to give them voice. I think they felt like respected for just having their experiences matter and having this outlet to share their stories. And the NowSPAR is currently still working on. They've had a rough go. They lost their leader, Matilda Wamba, rest in peace, passed away from COVID, and they've lost a lot of everything. She was the African representative to the UN Sport for Women and Girls committee. And so they've been set back in a lot of ways, but we're going to try to continue to do more and try to find ways to create more gender sensitive and youth focused research, and also with the emphasis on making research fun. If you're going to drag kids into your research, we should feel an obligation to make it interesting and engaging. And that's me. Thank you for listening.
Great, Sarah. Well, thank you for making us so engaged, and that was fantastic. So, could I invite Aneeqa, please?
Okay, let me just first start sharing my presentation.
Sorry, Catherine, I have one question. Is there time for a Q&A after this session? Because I'd like to ask Sarah something. Okay.
I hope so. I hope so. Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Great, Aneeqa. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine, for inviting me here. Hi, everybody. I'm Aneeqa Malik, as I've introduced myself. And I am going to share a new research paradigm with you, which kind of covers how I did my PhD following this path. So as we are exploring new tools and how can research be more fun, and it's engaging the community as well. So I'm part of a research crew. We are a global research group of academics from around the four corners, or what we call the four walls. And we are a communiversity, which is a university for the community. So I'm also going to share an economic model from Pakistan, because I'm in the panel for SDGs for, I know you would be thinking, why a brotherhood model for a gender equality panel, but I'll explain that later on. And let's begin. So my presentation will cover these four SDGs, or I've touched upon: poverty, gender equality, which I would actually say gender perspective equality, because the feminine perspective is kind of missing from the research methodologies. And also, you know, the reduced inequalities, because I've worked with the communities on grassroots level here, migrant communities with women as well. So this matters to me a lot, because the missing voices from locally and also globally, the global south, from the global south, these are the missing voices. And as my colleague, Professor Ronnie Lessam, always says, the West should also follow the rest. So we are going to explore that. So let's begin. I'm going to introduce a new paradigm, as I said, which we actually call research and innovation as well. We believe that research has to be transformative rather than just informative. It should transform people and contribute towards building healthy societies and sustainable enterprises. But how can social research be turned into social or integral innovation beyond measurements? Because that's, to us, is very restrictive. So these are some of the guiding thoughts that I'm sharing with you, that we believe there's no such thing as individual learning. we actually believe that it's a communal and societal issue. It's a process, which is an ongoing process. So participation in everyday life is a social process of communal learning. So we all learn from interinstitutionally. And what I mean by interinstitutionally, it means that starting from the individual to the community, to the organization or enterprise that they are part of, and then the society on the whole they are part of. So it's a communal learning process, and bodies of knowledge and learning processes and individual education and training require a new reconceptualization as social products. And most importantly, institutional arrangements for learning are assumed to be separate from everyday practices. So say, for example, the universities are not, they are aware, but they are not involved in the process of what's happening in the communities, hence communiversity. Right, so we always start with the individual or the personal calling, because the integral methodology, it deals with the issue in a way that both social meaning and personal significance are part of it. So why does it matter to me that I'm researching on something like this? So my journey started from migration, as in being an immigrant in the UK. I started looking around and looking at my Pakistani community landscape. I was seeing a lot of dissonance. So the integral kind of, you have to look at a holistic perspective of everything. So around the time I started my journey or my quest, integration was a big buzzword at that time, rather than sustainability or impact. So it was all about how to integrate in a new culture and society. So I've just drawn this map so you can see that I was looking at the holistic map, as in there's so much that was sort of missing from the mainstream, the research that was done on integration and the data that was being collected. So there was something else happening on the ground. And my main question was that how come the Pakistani or Muslim community is a bit behind, or they are very insular of what is happening here. So I started looking deeper into it. And is faith also an issue? As in, is faith stopping them? Because the issue of Muslim identity was a big topic around that time.
Sorry, Aneeqa, are we still on the first slide?
Oh, no. Are the slides
just
not
seeing your first slide? Is everybody the same, or?
Yeah, I think you need to go to slideshow and then begin slideshow.
Right. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, now we're seeing
so that's
movement.
number 2. Yeah.
But
Oh,
it's
God.
still on the, it's not on the presentation mode if you want that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Shall we try?
we're on SDGs now, number 3, Aneeqa.
Can you see it now?
We can see the SDGs slide.
Next one?
No, not yet. If you
Oh,
can.
gosh.
No, keep going.
So
Yeah.
I think I should just leave it like this then, because maybe it won't work.
That's fine.
Let me see.
It's very easy to understand you.
Right. I'm just going to move one more slide. Can you see the slide change now?
We're on towards a new research and innovation.
No, it's not working, so I'm going to leave it here.
Okay.
Shall we just leave it like this? Is everybody okay with it?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not going to do the slideshow now. Okay, so I was actually on this slide. I was talking about my calling. I was showing you this, the landscape of my community here. Right, so moving on from I've explained this. So let's move on to the next slide. So my PhD journey, which actually is, I took onto a path of holistic development, which we call a big PhD in our university setting. And we also call it a transformation journey because it started with my own quest, an individual calling or quest that I was looking for something which can A, mobilize my community, and B, also thinking, because around that time I was doing projects with migrant women, and I was dependent on funding from the councils and big lottery fund. And the issue with the Pakistani, especially community groups, and especially who were a bit religious, was the fact that they said, oh, this is not permissible, it's haram, why are you using lottery money? And then my question was, then how come we haven't developed our own, endowment funds or community finance models that we can utilize that for community development? And mind you, the question also was that I'm just giving you an example, that within the month of Ramadan, Muslims can gather up to 100 million pounds as charity, because we give a lot of charity around throughout the year, but especially in the month of Ramadan. So my question was, how come this money is not being utilized to develop the community? And when I say this is because when I was working with these migrant women, I was shocked. I mean, I was coming from Pakistan as well, from not a very well-off family, but, very comfortable middle-class family, educated. But these women I was shocked to hear one woman saying she cannot spell London. And I was shocked, what's happening here? Why is this happening? And nobody's paying attention. And somebody has to work with them. So the question, as I raised, was, if we are raising so much money, why isn't this money being used for the development of our communities, and especially projects for women? Because once my funding cycle would come to an end, I'm again dependent on finances, and dependent on looking for finances from outside of my community. So that was what my PhD was about, and also that there was a lot of dialogue around the mode of Islamic finance, which is based on equity and also interest-free models. So the loans have to be interest-free. And this took me to Pakistan, my home country, because I wanted to see what is happening here. Is the situation same over there as well? So overall, I came up with a new terminology using the integral research and innovation methodology and language as well. So our PhD is about not just researching, but also then innovating something. So I came up with my motto, which I termed as solidarity, which is the soul of Islamic economics and finance, which I thought was missing. It was, to me, it looked like, again, the capitalistic mindset and that kind of language. And I was from a spiritual background, and I thought, maybe we can develop and adopt a new language which could be understood by the people. And could that be could we mobilize communities like this? So that quest took me to Pakistan. And just quickly, so the solidarity economy model actually came from integral economic model, which also, so there is kind of a progression. The integral economic model was developed by Professor Ronnie Lessem and Alexander Schiffer. They are the co-founders of Transform, which is now Transform Community Associates. And this was developed this was also a progression from Rudolf Steiner's associative economics, which was a threefold economic model. So integral then adds another layer on economic, capital, and also social life. But with integral economics, you have to look at the enterprise being that vehicle which can deliver, which can release what we call the genius of a particular community, so community and society. So one of the main distinctive attribute of integral economics and also integral research is that we work with the society we work on the particularity of a society. This is what we call the genius of which we say is embedded in a society. So I'm going to now share the integral research and innovation model, which was developed by Ronnie Lesseman and Alexander Schiffer. And integral, we call it because it has a holistic perspective of the research methodologies, which is starting with your community, humanism, holism, then spirituality and belief system, which we call the Eastern Path of Renewal. So it starts with the relational, then renewal, and the reason, which is rationalism, and pragmatism. So basically, it has to look at the holistic, have a holistic rather than an empirical and very rigid model of research. And so it's not just science and art, it's basically four, that is art, history, science, and enterprise is also included, and the methodology is used is phenomenology, hermeneutics, rationalism, and empiricism. So it's not just one model that is, so as our friend in the morning, Mark Garavan, was saying, but how do you measure? So we are against this as well, that measurements, how do we measure these? Say, for example, spirituality, the model I'm going to share with you in the next slide. So this is what they also believe, Ronnie and Alexander and our community, we work together on this, that social research is disconnected from philosophy. And why philosophy is also important is because historical experience calls for rethinking and meaning of social transformation for people's liberation, not just a philosophical methodology or research methodology. Philosophy is a system. Philosophy actually, I believe more than anyone else, brings clarity and meaning into careers of individuals and common nations and common civilization. And the strength traditions have in men and women's life have always been tended to expect that particular philosophy or religion still prevails in groups, as I saw with the groups I was working with. So the methodology used originates from somewhere, and that was where I was delving deeper into the philosophy, because I saw that being Muslims, we are big on philosophy. Everybody talks about the philosophy of religion. So I had to then look deeper into it, and I developed not a measurement, but a calibration model, a 4-piece model, which so I'm not just, it wasn't about hypothesizing about philosophy, but it's about a live example and case study, which I saw in Pakistan. And that was what my book was on, about that from philosophy, principles come from that particular philosophy, and the practices were also based on those principles. And then the paradigm, an integral paradigm, emerges. So I'm going to quickly show you a quote by Otonji. He's an African, very renowned African philosopher. And he says that philosophy is a history, not merely a system. It is essentially an open process, a restless, unfinished quest, which actually means that there is a continuation. It keeps on, from philosophy, further development, and new philosophies emerge and new ideas come from there. So I'm going to now introduce you to a model of an economic model, which is based on brotherhood. So why am I sharing a brotherhood model in a gender equality panel, you may ask? The reason is that this model is, it's called brotherhood because the philosophy comes from the Islamic tradition and the Sunnah, we call the Prophet's tradition, from Medina about 1400 years ago. And the story goes that when the Prophet migrated from one city to another, the people of Medina shared half of their properties, their wealth, everything with their brothers who were the immigrants coming from Mecca. So that sets the precedent that abundance, especially in an Islamic context, that abundance should be shared. And Quran talks about it, and the Prophet actually set an example. But saying that, why am I bringing this into when I'm talking about philosophy and practices? And also in the Islamic finance arena, I never saw anyone talking about this. But when I went to Pakistan and I visited this organization, which is called Akhwat, which is brotherhood. So they have revived the philosophy. They picked up from like 1400 years ago. Nobody then talked about, yes, it's talked about in a very religious setting and about, brotherhood and the muahat, which I translated as solidarity, because it's more like a spiritual brotherhood. So what is the model about? The model is that they share, so the people who, the basic philosophy is that the haves should share with the have-nots of the society. I know it sounds very simple, but it's difficult because how we are all so attached to our own possessions and our wealth. So coming back to what I shared with you before about Muslims giving a lot of charity. There are 4 main charity streams running in a Muslim community and society. Sorry, is everyone with me? Can you see the slides now? It's gone very quiet. Hello?
Sorry,
Yes,
yes.
I can see the slides.
Oh, okay. Oh my God, it was so quiet. I thought everybody's gone and my computer is not. But sorry about this.
If I could ask you.
Yeah, we are listening. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just very conscious that we have to finish at 3:30 and we have another presenter. So.
Oh gosh. So, okay, I'm not going to explain this model more, but I'll just quickly say the model is based on the 4 charity streams running in a Muslim or a Muslim community or a society. So they give interest-free loans to this organization, following the philosophy of the Prophet and sharing with your abundance with your needy brothers and sisters. They give interest-free loans. And not only that, they have actually developed a model which was, I'm going to next slide and show you that I was talking about integral economics. So it's a 4-fold model where they give interest-free loans. It's done in a religious space. So they have brought back the culture of mosque and churches as hubs of community activation and community participation. And then they have also converted the borrowers into donors. So the borrowers, because they take money for giving nothing, like they don't pay interest, they only pay a charge of £1 to fill out a form. So they give back by contributing to the endowment fund, which keeps on growing. And also about 50,000 people have volunteered with them, with this organization. It's counting as well. So it's kind of a fourfold model, which is the communities involved, community building, and conscious co-evolution, because the communal mobilization was also done through this concept of, the philosophy and the practices. I'll quickly now show you, okay, so I was going to show you how I calibrated all that, but quickly. So I applied the integral research methodology of phenomenology and feminism. So these were the tools that I applied, and feminism, as you would know, that it's more about the feminine is, there are no rigid boundaries for the female feminine, or especially the divine feminine. So feminist researchers will often integrate personal experience into research. And you would see that throughout the presentation, this is what I was trying to say, that it came from my own journey, from my own quest, which was very spiritual, onto then what is happening around me, my community, and then also my country in Pakistan. So I developed a 4P model of calibration to see how societies go through regeneration, because now the Ahud Foundation have given up to now loans to 5 million families in Pakistan. Oh, and the issue of brotherhood, because compared to what Grameen Bank started in Bangladesh, they were giving loans to women. It started with women empowerment. But Ahud Foundation believes that because the family system is quite strong in Pakistan and family is a unit, so they give loans to families. They say not just to a man or a woman, because if you start empowering just the woman, then there were, some family issues as well. So they kind of tackle that issue as well. So they say we give it to family, and it's called brotherhood because of the historical significance and relevance to it. Okay.
So, thank you so much. I'm so sorry, but I'm just conscious we have to finish.
Oh, okay. So I can just sum up, because I was going to
thank you.
show. Okay, so what I'm proposing here is a holistic knowledge and research framework, especially coming from a very feministic point of view, that we have to go beyond the gender issue of feminism by proposing a holistic knowledge framework. And we can build strongly on the female dimension of relating, integrating, caring, and love. So I think this sums up my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions after this. Thank you.
Aneeqa, thank you so much. And there's so much that we can learn, from each other, and all the presentations will be available online, and we also have recordings. So thank you. And again, I apologize, the time is so short.
No,
thank you. Zahbia, could I invite you, please?
Sure. Catherine, I'm wondering, just because there's only 15 minutes left of this session, and I'm sure you wanted to leave some time for discussion, and that's kind of the richness and benefit of this, whether I just forgo my presentation and you do have some time for questions on the two presentations that you've had. I'm happy to share my notes and my presentation with participants at a later stage. I'm just worried about time as well. You.
I think if we can speak if you could speak for 10 minutes, maybe, Zahbia, because
sure, I'll try. I mean, I'm not sure what I'd be able to cut. I'm
sure, or even if you just want to speak to the main headings, we'd be very happy, because, you know, the whole theme of conflict is often one that's neglected, you know. Most of the time when we talk about gender, we're talking about women who are not affected by conflict, and I think it's mostly males. So do you want me to ask you a few questions, Zahbia? Would that be easier?
I mean, I'll try and just condense what I had.
Yeah.
I was just trying to leave you some space. We've only got 15 minutes, and I will actually have to drop off at 3:30 as well.
Fine.
Anyway, okay, I'll try and speed through some of this quite quickly. So yeah, as I mentioned in my introduction, I work for Safe World. It's an independent international NGO that's focused on peace building. So the main focus of it is to prevent violent conflict and build safer lives. Sorry, let me see if I can pull up the presentation, but we might not really be very useful right now. No, I'm not actually able to.
Sorry. No, if you just speak
to
the themes, we'd be.
Is that working?
Yeah. Great.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's a quick overview of Safe World. Its primary focus is on programming in the area of security and justice, and particularly it focuses on centering people who have been affected by conflict to improve their own safety and security. So, you know, our kind of main approach is that people play an active role in preventing and transforming conflict and building peace, that they have access to fair, effective paths to address grievances and inequalities that drive conflict, including gender inequalities, and that people have with influence exercise their power to promote just and equitable societies. So we work, you know, at the very kind of community level with policymakers, decision makers, to try and influence policy, as well as globally, internationally, with policymakers as well. Let me just, these are the countries that we work in. You can look them up on the website. Just to go through it a bit more quickly. So as well as the community security approach, we work a lot on conflict and gender sensitivity. So ensuring that, you know, international interventions, whether they be, well, if they are focused in conflict affected contexts, whether they be humanitarian development, programming is conflict sensitive, that do not exacerbate conflict drivers and cause harm, and are ideally gender transformative in support of transforming gender norms and inequalities, but at least gender sensitive. We also work quite a lot on women, peace and security to integrate a kind of strong gender perspective into our community security programming, and working with partners to understand particular challenges faced by women and girls, and supporting women's participation in policymaking, peace processes. So in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, our main focus is on Goal 16, Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions, with, of course, a heavy emphasis on gender equality and reducing inequalities. But actually, we have a whole programme of work, which is thinking about putting SDG 16, so the one promoting peace, justice and inclusion, into practice, and thinking about how you localise that. You can find more of that information on our website, but I just wanted to touch on that. In terms of, so, you know, we strongly use research at Safe World. It's a fundamental aspect of its work to inform our peace building strategies, to inform program design and use and support of policy advocacy. And it also shapes the way we engage with communities as well. So, you know, there's a wide variety of reasons why we might conduct research. Sometimes it's part of conflict analysis as a foundation for developing programming. We'd use what we call community security assessments, where we, over kind of a month or so, work quite closely with communities and community groups to understand what their security concerns are. We do assessments of gender and conflict sensitivity, both for our own work and, as I mentioned, other interventions, and as well as evaluations to inform programme redesign and institutional learning. But particularly, Safe World's research is change orientated, so it's seeking to generate solutions to inform programming and policy priorities. We also undertake research in collaboration with partners to generate knowledge. So over the last few years, we've had this huge shift away to kind of complement our peace building approach, which is very much, centering the people who are most affected by conflict, making sure their priorities and experiences are kind of front and center of programming. We've tried to do that with our research as well. So, recognizing that conventional research processes are often done by people external to context, and, participants can be quite passive, or often seen as passive, or seen as kind of people from which to extract knowledge, and that can reproduce quite unequal power relations. So we've been trying to, reshape the way in which we look at research. So particularly encompassing participatory action research, and, ensuring that there's participation of our partners and some of the community groups that we work with in the research design, in the data gathering analysis, and ensuring that research outputs are useful for the communities that we're working with and support wider change agendas that they themselves are identifying. We think this is really important, particularly in a conflict-affected or politically sensitive context, that we understand very clearly the ways in which people taking part in research can be harmful to them, can create security issues for them. And we see, the research itself as not just a means kind of to an end, but a contribution to peace building itself. So often research processes are opportunities to build confidence between groups, as well as address, where it's possible, unequal power relations between various stakeholders. So this was just a kind of, the participation continuum that we kind of work on and try and work towards more the right side of this. I had been hoping to share a bit of research that we did in Bangladesh. Catherine, are you happy for me to do that still?
Yes, please. Yeah. If you can do it within 6-7 minutes, Zahbia.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'm just afraid somebody might close the room on us because,
no, that's fine.
Which is a bit brutal. So thanks.
Sure, no worries. So we did supported by quite a few research consultants and 2 or 3 Bangladeshi organizations as well. And particularly our partners, they were kind of front and center of this research. We conducted a research looking at tensions that have been emerging in Cox's Bazar. It's one of the largest refugee camps in Bangladesh, and I think in Asia, where a lot of Rohingya refugees have traveled to. And it's been creating, there's been tensions emerging between communities, Bangladeshi communities and Rohingya refugee communities within Cox's Bazar, because of, access to resources, because of the ways in which Rohingya populations are seen to be gaining benefit over Bangladeshi communities from humanitarian providers and the government as well. And so we were looking to implement a project which would be focusing on enhancing social cohesion between Bangladeshi and Rohingya populations, but also bring in a strong emphasis on GBV prevention and women's empowerment. We were looking very specifically at the ways in which tensions are dealt with, so security and justice responses and mechanisms, and particularly related to gender-based violence, but also the ways in which the existing humanitarian programming might be exacerbating some of these issues as well. Let me just jump through. I mean, one of the reasons why we had focused particularly on GBV prevention, response and women's empowerment was really with the understanding that there was quite a high prevalence of gender-based violence among both populations, and one of the core safety and security concerns by women and girls, but also because that increased threat of gender-based violence is a huge barrier for both women and girls reporting their security concerns, but also participating, being able to inform decision-making processes and being included in decision-making. So, you know, this is a big part of our programming and working in conflict context, is understanding gender norms as a driver of conflict and violence, and making those connections very strongly, and sharing the experiences with policymakers, so that programming can be more effective in terms of addressing both violence experienced by you know, all members of a particular community, as well as addressing conflict. Let me just run through this. So yeah, this was some of the research aims. One was to inform the design of the programme and how to strengthen security and justice responses. And as I mentioned, acknowledging the link between GBV and conflict. Oops, sorry. You know, understanding that militarization, there was a huge presence of the Bangladeshi army and police forces around the camp. That has reinforced masculinization, that there's strong connections between informal security and justice providers and military authorities that have exacerbated forms of GBV. Also, particularly the importance of breaking down barriers between you know, the distinction between private and public spheres, and the idea where violence takes place. We often, you know, the assumption is that conflict violence is associated with external actors. It's very public violence. It happens, you know, out in the open. But you know, the particular challenges for women and girls is that they're both exposed to this private violence within their households and communities, particularly in the context of insecurity and displacement and conflict, as well as, you know, public, as well in the public. So I'm really that these are both important aspects of thinking about conflict and security and justice. I wanted to get on to, just very wary of time, I'm skipping through quite a lot. So the
going, Zahbia, because I haven't heard anything from the others, so we'll keep
okay.
going if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank
sure, sure, that's grand then. Yeah, I mean, another area, so I won't get a chance to discuss through the findings properly, but another area of focus, and one of the reasons to bring in this discussion around GBV against women and girls into discussion around social cohesion was also that understanding that some of the kind of underlying factors and some of the programming that's been taking place from humanitarian actors to address social cohesion, so the kind of disparities between Rohingya and Bangladeshi communities in terms of trying to provide greater resources to or access to resources to different communities, is that also this kind of access to and control over resources has a huge impact on violence against women and girls. They often have fewer resources that they do control. The ones that they do have control over exposes them to greater violence, in particular domestic violence. Yeah, often humanitarian actors were distributing resources, trying to kind of to women as those who have the kind of greater responsibility for care within the family, but that is actually has both kind of exposed them more to violence and contributed to their continued kind of exclusion and increased harm So the research that we did, these are the types of groups that we were talking to. So AG refers to adolescent girls. So we disaggregated participant groups by age and gender to ensure they were able to talk to their own interests. We also used a a feminist research approach, both in the research design and the data collection. This is very much kind of positioning women and girls as knowers in their own lives, as co-creators of knowledge through the research. So it explicitly privileged women's experiences, women's perspectives, and, you know, not just only kind of in generating the data, but also being able to shape how that analysis and those insights were being articulated as well. And this was really significant component of security and justice, because, as well as social cohesion, because it was in itself kind of a proxy or illuminating in the ways in which security and justice are not inclusive, accessible, and representative. So they kind of were able to demonstrate, you know, gender tensions within communities when responses did not meet the needs and rights of women and girls, and understand their kind of subordination when we talk, when security providers and humanitarian actors were talking about community peace and cohesion. So it was really important to kind of center women and girls perspectives within this. And aligned with this commitment to a feminist research ethic was the decision to use participatory tools for data collection, so that the tools themselves were non-extractive. They lent themselves to supporting group discussion and co-creation of knowledge, and as well to use kind of illustrative and non-literacy based methods. So allowed respondents to kind of determine and check back on their contributions. Obviously, ethics was a huge question here. We had aimed, the whole point of the research was to inform a program, so to be part, you know, kind of a starting point to begin these conversations and learning over the life of project, over which more trust could be built, respondents could see more positive outcomes from their contributions, and the, you know, creation of spaces for women and girls to identify their concerns. So in itself, the research was the start of that process of building those spaces through those, what we call focus group discussions, but essentially spaces for women and girls to come together and actually identify their own concerns and have a space where they were able to share those. Are you happy for me to continue, Catherine? I just wanted to
text, so
okay, I'll just share quickly. Okay,
yeah.
I'll just share quickly some of the tools that we used. Yeah, for example, one tool that we used was in order to map tensions and insecurity, provide an outline of a house and some community facilities, and ask participants to mark and draw representations on the map in terms of what are the things that make women feel most frightened and unsafe. Oh yeah, sorry, and just to say as well, because in terms of kind of ethics as well, because we weren't able to at that point provide follow-up services and the research intervention was quite short, we were trying to ensure that we weren't inviting kind of direct personal disclosures, so that lots of the questions were framed in the third person, asking what respondents had heard about, what they believed had happened to others, rather than you know, asking people to share direct personal experiences. And while that kind of risks kind of more hearsay and it might be less verifiable, it does provide a kind of protective barrier between respondents and their disclosures. So it's one of kind of inviting information about issues rather than expecting people to reveal issues that they've experienced themselves. So that was very important. So that's why you'll see some of the questions. What are the things that make women feel most frightened or unsafe? Then we asked them to kind of use dots to indicate the levels of impact on them. And then we repeated the process from the perspective of men, but with the same groups. So what they thought made men feel frightened or unsafe in their homes, in their communities and relationships. And that allowed us to compare and contrast what happened. Yeah, I'm going to stop there just because we have run over. There was another couple of, but yeah, that was just to share a little bit about kind of the process of developing methodologies in conflict context, some of the concerns and issues that we have to address in terms of developing research to support programming as well in conflict context.
Superb, Zahbia. Thank you so much. And I'm really sorry we don't have time for questions. I think, and that's the idea about asking people to come to Theralis tomorrow, because we can continue. Okay, I think we're back. Are we in the main session? No. Okay, we'll move you back to the main meeting in 10 seconds. Phew. Thank you.